Hollywood's golden lights have always adored glamour, but for decades before red carpets and filters, beauty meant something fuller. Literally. Curves weren't hidden, they were worshipped, and among those curves, one stood out as the ultimate icon of seduction, the bust. Today, we take a journey across time to meet the women whose figures and fierceness defined generations. From platinum blondes to dark-haired goddesses, each left her own imprint on beauty, cinema, and sensuality itself. Anita Ekberg. She didn't walk onto the screen, she glided. Anita Ekberg wasn't just an actress, she was an event. With a stunning 40-inch bust and statuesque frame, the Swedish-born beauty became one of the most unforgettable faces and figures of international cinema. But it wasn't just her curves that made her a legend, it was the way she carried them. Anita didn't play shy. She owned every inch of her body with confidence, humor, and that magnetic touch of European mystery. In Federico Fellini's La Dolce Vita, she delivered one of the most iconic moments in film history. Stepping into the Trevi fountain in a strapless black gown, her golden hair falling over her shoulders like silk. That image wasn't just sensual, it was cinema. Born in Malmö, Sweden in 1931, Anita's journey to stardom began in pageants, crowned Miss Sweden before setting foot in Hollywood. And while studios tried to mold her into the typical blonde bombshell, Anita had other plans. She brought a unique mix of physical glamour and cool detachment that didn't just attract attention, it demanded it. Her roles in films like War and Peace, Boccaccio 70, and of course La Dolce Vita didn't always require complex dialogue. Because Anita understood the power of presence, she didn't need to say much. You felt her, she was bold, she was unfiltered. She refused to fit the Hollywood mold. And that sometimes made her controversial, but always unforgettable. Off-screen, she had a sharp tongue and a strong will, never shy about criticizing the industry that at times tried to reduce her to a mere silhouette. She didn't play the ingenue. She was a goddess with a cigarette in one hand and her head held high. And while critics often focused on her figure, Anita's real strength was her unapologetic sense of self. She didn't shrink herself to fit the screen. She expanded it. Anita Ekberg wasn't just the woman in the fountain. She was a force of nature. And she made sure the world would never forget her ripple. Jean Harlow. Before Monroe, before Mansfield, there was Jean Harlow, Hollywood's very first platinum blonde. With a delicate 36-inch bust and a look that blended sweetness with something just a little dangerous, Jean Harlow redefined what it meant to be a bombshell, long before the word even existed. She wasn't just another pretty face, she was the face of early 1930s glamour, bold, flirty, and entirely self-possessed. Born Harleen Carpenter in Kansas City, Jean didn't set out to be a star. In fact, she stumbled into Hollywood almost by accident, accompanying a friend to a casting call and walking away with the part herself. Fate clearly had plans. Her breakthrough came in Hell's Angels, 1930, but it was platinum blonde, red dust, and bombshell that turned her into a cultural phenomenon. On screen, she was magnetic, playful, sharp, sometimes naive, sometimes naughty, and always utterly unforgettable. Her body, particularly her bust, became part of the fantasy Hollywood sold to the world. She wore silk gowns like second skin, her curves highlighted by lighting that seemed to worship her. But Jean was more than the sum of her measurements. Her timing was impeccable, her expressions devastating. She could disarm with a wink or break hearts with a single glance. Directors loved her. Audiences adored her. And in an era when Hollywood was still figuring itself out, Jean knew exactly who she was and what she wanted to project. Off camera, she was reportedly shy, funny, and incredibly hardworking. She wasn't immune to struggle. In fact, her life was marked by tragedy. Jean passed away at just 26 years old, the same age many actresses today are just getting started. But in that short time, she left behind something eternal, a legacy that shaped generations of actresses and a body of work that still glows with life decades later. Jean Harlow didn't just step into the light. She was the light. And even now, her sparkle hasn't dimmed. Claudia Cardinale. She was the kind of woman who didn't need to announce herself. Claudia Cardinale simply appeared, and everything else faded. With her 37-inch bust and sun-kissed beauty, she brought something to the screen that no one else could. A blend of fire and softness, of stillness and strength. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. Her presence was enough. Born in Tunisia to Italian parents, Claudia was raised under the Mediterranean sun, and she carried that light with her wherever she went. Her voice was husky, her eyes deep and unreadable. Her curves, graceful and real, not sculpted by studios, but by nature. When she entered cinema, the world didn't quite know what to make of her, and that mystery only added to her charm. In 8.5, she became Fellini's vision of the ideal woman, not as a fantasy, but as a memory, a muse. In The Leopard, she wore her gowns like armor. Elegant, majestic, untouchable. She didn't have to seduce. She simply existed. Claudia's bust, her figure, her smile, they were all part of the allure, yes, but her power came from something deeper. She played women who endured, who loved fiercely, and who kept their dignity intact no matter what the script threw at them. She refused to bow to Hollywood's expectations. She didn't bleach her hair. She didn't chase American fame. She stayed true to herself, and that made her unforgettable. Cardinale's beauty was never vulgar, never obvious. It was timeless, earthy, a kind of elegance you couldn't fake, and decades later when we look at her face, on posters, in films, in memory, we still don't see just an actress. We see a presence. Claudia Cardinale didn't demand the spotlight. She made it follow her. Jayne Mansfield. If Marilyn Monroe was the fantasy, Jayne Mansfield was the punchline and the headline, with her explosive 40-inch bust, cotton candy blonde hair, and a smile that could melt glass. Jayne didn't just step into Hollywood. She crashed through the door, feather boa first. She was outrageous, she was theatrical, and she absolutely knew what she was doing. Jayne was a master of the tease, both in her wardrobe and in her wit. She once said, a 40-inch bust and a lot of perseverance will get you more than a cup of coffee. And she wasn't wrong. In films like The Girl Can't Help It and Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, she played up her curves and her comedic timing with wild abandon, turning every scene into a spectacle of campy, confident sensuality. Her wardrobe choices were legendary. Low-cut, tight, sparkling, and always guaranteed to make the front page. But here's what most people miss. Jayne Mansfield wasn't just a walking wink. She was intelligent, fluent in 5 languages, with a sharp sense of self-marketing decades ahead of her time. She turned her bus line into a brand before branding was even a word. She was also deeply devoted to her fans. Whether posing with adoring crowds or performing live across the country, Jayne made everyone feel like they were in on the joke, because she was the joke, and the genius behind it. Of course, the media loved to reduce her to her measurements, but Jayne leaned into it, flipped it upside down, and turned it into power. She owned her image completely, curves, chaos, and all. Her life, like her fame, was tragically cut short in 1967, but her legacy, still dazzling, still defiant. Jayne Mansfield didn't just break the mold, she melted it. And she did it in heels, with a martini in one hand and the world in the other. Hedy Lamarr. Some women captivate you with a look. Hedy Lamarr, she captivated, and then quietly changed the world. With a 35-inch bust and features that seemed sculpted from marble, Hedy was hailed as one of the most beautiful women to ever grace the screen. But her beauty was only the surface. Beneath it was a mind decades ahead of its time. Born in Vienna in 1914, she was a child of 2 worlds, European refinement and scientific curiosity. She first shocked audiences with a daring performance in Ecstasy, 1933, but it wasn't long before Hollywood came calling. And when it did, Hedy stepped into the spotlight with a calm, ethereal allure. Her performances in Samson and Delilah, Algiers, and Boomtown made her a star. She wore elegance like a second skin, gowns that gently framed her bust, cheekbones carved for the camera, and a gaze that said more than any script could. But while the world obsessed over her beauty, Hedy was thinking about torpedoes. Yes, during World War II, while other actresses posed for pinups, Hedy Lamarr was inventing a frequency hopping system designed to prevent enemy interception of radio-controlled weapons. That idea, once dismissed, became the foundation for modern technologies like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. She didn't boast about it, she didn't market it, she just did it. And Hollywood, for the most part, ignored it. But maybe that's what made her extraordinary. Hedy didn't need validation, she was validation. She proved that a woman could be both revered for her curves and respected for her calculations. She wasn't just a starlet, she was a strategist, a creator, a quiet disruptor. Hedy Lamarr didn't need to shout. She let her beauty speak for itself, and her inventions speak for all of us. Rita Hayworth. They called her the love goddess, but Rita Hayworth was more than a dream. She was every emotion Hollywood ever tried to bottle. With a graceful 36-inch bust and a face framed in soft waves, Rita didn't just act, she hypnotized. Her movements were smooth like smoke, her voice, velvet with just a hint of ache. Born Margarita Carmen Cancino in Brooklyn, she carried her Spanish roots in her blood, her dance, and her fire. She trained as a dancer before she ever stepped in front of a camera. And you could see it in every role. Whether gliding across the floor in CoverGirl or standing defiantly in Gilda, Rita owned the screen like few ever have. And that scene in Gilda, The one where she flips her hair and sings, "Put the blame on Mame." It wasn't just iconic, it was cultural alchemy. Her curves, especially her bust, were accentuated by the cut of her gowns, designed not just to reveal her figure, but to make it unforgettable. But behind the elegance was a woman craving more than applause. Rita struggled with identity, love, and the weight of stardom. She once famously said, "Men go to bed with Gilda and wake up with me." That single line tells you everything. Rita wasn't a fantasy, she was a person, playing one. And she did it with so much grace that you felt honored to believe the illusion. She wasn't loud, she didn't need to be. Rita seduced with a look, a sway, a whisper. Her bust, her body, yes, they were admired. But it was her presence, that slow burn, that made her eternal. Rita Hayworth didn't just define sex appeal, she made it look like an art form. Novak, she didn't chase the spotlight, it found her quietly and stayed. With a poised 37-inch bust and an expression that always held something back, Novak didn't burst onto the screen. She floated into frame, like a secret you weren't sure you were supposed to see. Born Marilyn Pauline Novak in Chicago, she entered Hollywood with the same icy mystique that would later define her. The studio dyed her hair blonde, gave her a new name, and cast her opposite the biggest stars of her time. But Kim was never just window dressing. In Picnic, she played longing. In Pal Joey, she played elegance. But it was in Hitchcock's Vertigo where she etched herself into cinematic history. Playing not one but two roles, Novak portrayed a woman shaped by obsession, and a woman losing herself to it. Her bust, her curves, her stillness, all part of the illusion. She was both the dream and the ghost of it. Unlike other bombshells of the era, Kim didn't flirt with the camera. She let it come to her. There was an emotional gravity in her performances, a quiet strength that never needed to raise its voice. She could wear a gown that accentuated every inch of her figure and still leave you wondering what she was thinking. That was her power. She kept something hidden, and in doing so made everyone want to see more. Kim Novak was never loud, never obvious. She was mystery in motion. And in a town obsessed with attention, she mastered the art of stillness. Carole Landis, she was radiant, she was charming, and she was gone too soon. With a 37-inch bust and a smile that felt like a warm invitation, Carole Landis had everything a Golden Age starlet needed, and more. She wasn't just beautiful, she was beloved. Nicknamed the Blonde Bombshell, Carole began as a chorus girl, dancing in the shadows of bigger names. But it didn't take long for her to steal the spotlight. Her breakout came in 1 million BC, clad in prehistoric skins with curves that practically roared off the screen. But Carole wasn't just another pretty face. She had timing, humor, and heart, something directors and fans noticed immediately. In Topper Returns, I Wake Up Screaming, and a string of wartime pictures, she brought an electric presence that made her more than a supporting player. She was unforgettable. Off-screen, she was adored by the troops. During World War II, Carole threw herself into entertaining soldiers overseas, traveling thousands of miles to boost morale. She even wrote a memoir, 4 Jills in a Jeep, capturing her experience on the front lines of laughter and courage. It was later adapted into a film with Carole playing herself. But behind the dazzling gowns and joyful performances was a woman fighting her own battles. In 1948, at just 29 years old, Carole Landis took her own life. A heartbreaking end to a story that felt unfinished. Still, her memory remains vivid. Carole embodied a type of glamour that was both classic and kind. Her 37-inch bust, her playful charm, her generosity of spirit, they were all part of a woman who gave everything she had to the stage, the screen, and the world. She wasn't just a starlet. She was a spark, and even now we remember the warmth she left behind. Marilyn Monroe. Some stars shine brightly. Marilyn Monroe glowed from the inside out, even when she was breaking, with a 37-inch bust and an hourglass figure that sculpted the very idea of the sex symbol. Marilyn didn't just embody desire, she defined it. But the real story of Marilyn was never about her body. It was about her battle to be seen as more than it. Born Norma Jean Mortensen, she spent her early life in foster homes, searching for stability and identity. That longing never quite left her, even after she dyed her hair blonde, perfected her breathy voice, and stepped into the spotlight as Marilyn. Her performances in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Some Like It Hot, and The 7-Year Itch turned her into a global icon. With every curve celebrated, every movement studied, her bust, her smile, her walk, they weren't just details. They became cultural reference points. But Marilyn wanted more than applause. She wanted respect. She studied acting seriously, formed her own production company, and lobbied for better scripts. She knew she was more than the jokes, the dresses, and the calendar photos. She wanted the world to see her soul, not just her silhouette. And behind the sparkle, there was vulnerability. Deep, real, and raw. It came through in her performances, it came through in her interviews, it came through in the way she paused, looked away, and let silence say what words couldn't. She was every contradiction, confident and fragile, adored and isolated, shaped by fame but aching to be taken seriously. Marilyn didn't invent the blonde bombshell. She humanized her. She turned a fantasy into a woman you could love, pity, admire, and mourn, all at once. Her life ended tragically in 1962, but her legacy has only grown brighter with time. Because Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a symbol. She was a soul, brilliant, bruised, and unforgettable. While Hollywood was busy polishing its blondes to a high gloss, Bettie Page slipped into stockings, flashed a knowing grin, and rewrote the rules. With a striking 36-inch bust, jet black bangs, and a body that celebrated curves instead of shrinking them, Bettie didn't try to fit into the Hollywood mold. She built her own world, one lined with velvet gloves, satin corsets, leather, lace, and unapologetic fun. She didn't just pose, she played. Her photos weren't about shame, they were about joy, flirtation, power. She looked straight into the lens like she knew your secrets and was completely fine with them. In the 1950s, she rose as a pinup queen, barefoot on the beach, sprawled across leopard print cushions, or holding a riding crop with a half smile that teased the line between innocence and provocation. She was the girl next door, if the girl next door knew exactly how much control she had, but under the fringe and fishnets was someone remarkably grounded. Bettie wasn't a Hollywood climber, she was authentic, playful, entirely at ease in her skin, at a time when that kind of confidence from a woman was considered dangerous. Her bust, her curves, her boldness, they weren't just admired, they were revolutionary. Eventually, she stepped away from public life, choosing privacy. Before Fitspo and protein shakes, there was Bettie Brosmer, and she made strong looks stunning. With a 38-inch bust and a famously tiny waist, Bettie Brosmer was the ultimate mid-century hourglass. But unlike many of her pinup peers, Bettie didn't just sit pretty, she stood tall, in heels and in purpose. Her look was unforgettable, a radiant smile, wide-set eyes, and curves so perfectly proportioned they looked sculpted by a 1950s cartoonist. But there was nothing artificial about her appeal. Bettie was the real deal, and the lens loved her. Throughout the 50s, she was everywhere. Magazine covers, calendar art, advertisements. She quickly became one of the most photographed pinup models in history. But she wasn't just posing, she was pioneering. Marrying bodybuilding legend Joe Weider, Bettie became the first mainstream model to fully embrace and promote women's fitness. She wasn't afraid of muscles, she lifted, she trained, she spoke out, encouraging women to see strength and curves not as opposites, but as partners. Her bust line, her physique, her energy, they were part of a broader message, that beauty isn't weakness, and femininity isn't fragile. Bettie eventually stepped back from modeling and moved into media, co-founding fitness magazines, writing columns, and shaping the early dialogue around women's empowerment through physical health. She wasn't just ahead of her time, she redesigned it. Bettie Brosmer proved that being curvy didn't mean being passive. It could mean being powerful. Mamie Van Doren. In the 1950s, when Hollywood was crafting its ideal woman in pearls and perfume, Mamie Van Doren showed up in high heels, tight sweaters, and a look that said, "Let's stir things up." With a fiery 38-inch bust and a name that sounded like a stage act all on its own, Mamie didn't try to blend in. She wasn't there to whisper, she came to crank the volume. While Monroe brought elegance and Mansfield turned up the glamour, Mamie delivered something different, edge. Her career burned brightest in a string of gritty, wild, low-budget cult films like Untamed Youth, Teacher's Pet, and High School Confidential. She played the rebel, the provocateur, the girl your parents warned you about but secretly couldn't stop watching. Her figure, especially that bold, commanding bust line, was a visual magnet, highlighted by plunging necklines and curve-hugging fabrics. But there was more than allure. Mamie had comic timing, sass, and enough attitude to make the censors nervous. She didn't just embrace the blonde bombshell image, she bent it to her will. Less polished, more rock and roll, half pin-up, half pin-puller. Critics may have brushed her off, but audiences didn't. They showed up for the spectacle, stayed for the swagger, and left knowing exactly who had stolen the scene. Mamie never tried to be a Monroe clone or a Mansfield copy. She outlasted them both, and she made sure the world remembered her by her own rules. She wasn't the fantasy. She was the flirt in the convertible at the drive-in with a lipstick smirk and both hands on the wheel. Mamie Van Doren didn't tone herself down for Hollywood. She turned herself all the way up and made the spotlight chase her. Jane Russell. Some actresses enter the frame and wait for the audience to notice. Jane Russell didn't wait. She owned the frame from the second she stepped into it. With a commanding 38-inch bust, a deep voice, and a smirk that said, "I see right through you," Jane Russell wasn't just beautiful, she was in control. Discovered by Howard Hughes, she exploded into the public eye in The Outlaw, 1943, a film so obsessed with her figure it became a censorship lightning rod. But controversy didn't faze Jane. She leaned into the spotlight, wearing her curves and her confidence like armor. She wasn't about fluttering lashes or breathy giggles. She was bold, sarcastic, smart. In Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, she stood toe-to-toe with Marilyn Monroe, not as competition but as a perfect counterpoint. While Marilyn floated, Jane grounded. While others flirted, Jane commanded. Her bust became a talking point. No surprise. But what really set her apart was how she never let it define her. In interviews, she rolled her eyes at the attention it got. She wasn't offended, just over it, because she knew she had more to offer. And she did. Off-screen, she was down-to-earth, deeply religious, and dedicated to causes she cared about, including adoption and veterans support. She used her fame to give, not just to glow. Jane Russell didn't play the Hollywood game. She played her game, and she played it with brass, brilliance, and a bus line the tabloids could never stop talking about. But if you asked her, she'd tell you the only thing bigger than her curves was her sense of humor. Sophia Loren. If beauty could be distilled into elegance and elegance into a woman, that woman would be Sophia Loren. With a 38-inch bust, eyes full of fire, and a presence that refused to be overshadowed by anyone, Sophia Loren didn't just arrive. She ascended. Born in war-torn Italy, raised in poverty, Sophia transformed herself into a cinematic goddess. But unlike Hollywood's polished starlets, Sophia brought something deeper. Realness, earth, soul. Her early roles in neo-realist Italian films showed a rough-edged sensuality, raw, emotional, untamed. She wasn't the fantasy. She was the woman behind it. And when Hollywood came calling, she didn't trade that identity for fame. She brought Italy with her. In Two Women, she gave a performance so powerful, so devastatingly human, that she became the first actor to win an Academy Award for a foreign language film. Her curves, her 38-inch bust, her commanding beauty, all enhanced by her ability to portray women with strength and sorrow, dignity and desire. She wore her body with pride. Not for approval, but as a statement. You could see it in every red carpet, every still frame, every glance. She wasn't begging to be desired. She knew she was, and moved through the world with grace because of it. As she aged, she never retreated from the public eye. She evolved. Gowns turned to power suits. Lipstick stayed red. That signature smile? Still devastating. Sophia Loren didn't just belong in the golden age of cinema, she defined it. And in a world constantly chasing youth and perfection, she taught us something enduring. That true allure isn't in the body alone. It's in how you carry the weight of your life, your story, and your self-worth.